Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you guys for another banging LCK matchup. The KT Rollster coaster avoided falling off the tracks. They beat Hanwha Life, so we're back to feeling good about them. Gen G are all of a sudden in 4th place in the LCK, which sets the stage for Gen G to nearly perfect game them in the first matchup.
I don't think this is what anybody was expecting this matchup to has been building up towards, but yes, right out of the gates, it was domination on Summoner's Rift from Gen G in this matchup against KT Rollster. All cylinders were firing in this first game. You had everybody getting in on the action, but nobody making more progress, more damage to the side of KT than your boy Ruler down in the bottom lane.
Yeah, it was a pretty sizable bot lane gap. The first one, they got the straight up 2v2 double kill that KT just was not expecting, and then that kind of started the snowball, and then we got to see Canyon on a jungle pick that isn't like Skarner or Trundle or something super tanky. It felt like the good old days, seeing him on an actual damage carry jungler like Nefiri.
Yeah, it was good to have that type of angle, and certainly one of the players, and probably the player that you could specify on Gen G that you would want to see a little bit more from, get back into some of the old habits that you have seen from him in the past and how he has dominated for this squad, set the pace, set up so much of his teammates. You got to see a lot of that here and a lot of the finish that he was able to put through when he's got some of that damage in his pocket and some of that agency a little bit more so. This was, again, all about Gen G in this first game. There was almost nothing going for KT Rollster. Every single answer came up Gen G.
And yet somehow, some way, KT shakes it off, says, okay, we're back. We roll into the second game, and they're in control. They're in the driver's seat. They got objectives. They got Baron. They're in control of Dragons. Looks like it should be a smooth closeout. Keen's Vayne is like 3k behind and basically irrelevant. And then it just takes one play. They try and catch out Chovy. Perfect comes on the flank on the Jace. And Gen G with the Nocturne completely turns this flank on its head. They win one team fight and steal the game.
It is so painful for KT Rollster because, again, there is a long road in this game that was played very well by KT Rollster to have the advantages, to have the leads that they were building out, to slowly make progress on the map, and it all gets thrown away in the wackiest of combinations of a poor choice, poor execution, and everything else, and it all snowballs at the worst possible time in the game. That Gen G is able to absolutely swoop in and swing that momentum off of that poor play and kind of punch back of the team fight and get through. And at that point, you're right, just absolutely take over the game, and there goes the series.
And unfortunately now, some of the bigger, more egregious throws over the last couple splits. It's KT Rollster sitting there holding or not holding the ball that they just threw at the other team.
There are probably at least 2 or 3 of the top 5 throws in the last year have been from KT Rollster, and I think that this one is an honorable mention on that list because of, again, just what type of control you had within this game and just that it falls apart at this moment in just the wacky combination of this is a mistake, this is a team that is primed and poised and not so far behind that they can't instantly swing off of a pivot point like a mistake like that, and then the timing in the game where it happens as far as your death timers and what is available and how you can push. It really is going to be a painful lesson for KT Rollster, and you hope that it's a lesson that you can step back into the classroom and retake the test and learn from. But for Gen G, they're out of school, my man. They are on the highway, and they are ripping and roaring and getting ready for playoffs.
Yeah, and now that win really makes this top 4 crazy because you have both T1 and Gen G sitting at 11-4. KT drops to 12-4. Hanwha a slightly distant 13-2. But now we're left here going, okay, who's actually the favorites to go to MSI in the LCK right now? Because as we know, it's top 2 seeds are most important. They'll play head-to-head. Winner automatically goes. Seems likely that Hanwha will at least be top 2. But right now, it feels like KT is now the distant 4th of these big 4. But, choosing 2 out of the 3 of Gen G, T1, Hanwha seems impossible right now.
If you had asked me 2 weeks ago to look at this picture and tell me who's going to find their way through, I almost would have said, okay, well, you can get the pencil and maybe the pen even if you want to get bold with it out and put Hanwha Life in one of those spots for the LCK. But given the run that we have seen from Gen G and T1 and the various aspects that have led to these runs that you could be excited about and believe in with both of those, familiar squads, you can't do that anymore at the top of the LCK, especially with that eye towards these best of series that you will get within the playoffs. It's up for grabs right now, given the form that we have seen from T1. Pentakill pays out there, and not to be outdone, Mr. Taxes in the rearview mirror ruler is out on Summoner's Rift, and he is dishing out some tax-free type of performances for Gen G.
And we're still going to get a couple head-to-heads to close out the regular season here. T1 and KT going to throw down, and in the final week, we get Gen G versus Hanwha Life. So obviously big seeding implications for all of those. But, T1 has the longest win streak right now with 5, just beat Gen G in, kind of surprise fashion. So I think for me, it's probably Hanwha T1 are the 2. If I had to pick right now, will be the ones repping at MSI.
I got to go with Gen G in the way that they have been roaring up. And again, especially a team that is looking more like the familiar dominant champion Gen G that we have seen in the past. So I'm going to go with them in that slot. And I think it is going to be heartbreak for Hanwha Life after all this rebounding and climbing back to that very top picture. It's going to be the familiar 2 duo rocking it on the international stage for the LCK. T1 and Gen G are my picks.
If after all this rocky, insane, back and forth competitive regular season, we end up with just T1, Gen G, again going to MSI, then I think we just have to write it up. Yep, the LCK is scripted. The drama's there, but the path always ends up being the same. It's not MSI on the line yet over in the LEC, but we are kicking off playoffs with a couple of marquee matchups. First up, we got KC versus G2, rematch from the absolute dismantling that G2 gave them to close out the regular season in that road show in Spain. And immediately I'm looking to that French phenom bot lane. Obviously, Yike was completely gapped by Skumond in the last series, so he'll need to step up more. But let's look at these AD carries. Kaliste takes the spot for France on the Esports Nations Cup. Hans Sama got to be a little salty after that to prove that he is the icon. But Kaliste also had some great performances against MKOI. This is an opportunity, I think, for Hans Sama, for people to remember. This guy is one of the elite AD carries of all time in Europe.
And this is going to be one heck of a challenge for him to step up to the plate in this matchup. And again, knowing what is going to be on the other side, not only in your counterpart in Kaliste, but especially that duo, because that has been the big part when you look at that bottom lane for KC, has been Busio's involvement, his play, and his creativity that has stepped in and I think unlocked another level and is pushing that evolution of that bottom lane, and specifically as an ADC and Kaliste that you are looking at in this matchup. Hans Sama can't stack up to him. Don't forget about that. I think that has to be something that we look back in the past history of this matchup, or in specifically looking at Hans Sama and how he can level up against some of these top tier challenges in that individual position. You can find that if you are G2. I don't know. This one I think is going to play out a little bit different than the last time around between both of these squads. I think the time away from it, the preparation for it, and just the importance and shift in this best of series, that is going to be where you're looking at this one to be a difference maker. Gonna be a spicy one to kick things off for the LEC. Always giving us a good dish to get started in playoffs.
It's, best of 5, so I'd be very surprised if this was a sweep either way, how this thing ends up playing out. I'd also be very surprised if G2 isn't going to MSI. I'm not going to say they're going to win the split, but I'd be surprised if they're not one of the two squads from EU going. The question is, do they get there through that winners bracket side, or do we see a nice little G2 losers bracket run as they lose to KC here?
This one is absolutely, I think, 50-50 at this point. There's no other way to decide it. I don't want to be Mr. Waffle Board, Mr. on the fence about it, but come on. I mean, this is G2 at this point, and it's one of those ones where, yes, you can envision them being the strong, dominant team throughout these playoffs and riding on through that winner's bracket. But at the exact same time, would it really surprise you if they do have maybe a bit of a stinker or don't quite showcase everything all there in this matchup against KC, get bounced, and then have to do that soul searching, that digging down, and really being that limit of, okay, you want to keep moving on in these playoffs? Well, you gotta kick us out of here. That's the test. And unfortunately, nobody in the LEC has stepped up to that test against G2.
The only thing scarier than a G2 matchup in playoffs is a G2 matchup in the losers bracket, because that's when they truly lock in. So for everybody else's sake, probably hope you don't see G2 on that losers bracket side. Other matchup of the weekend, we're going to have MKOI versus Vitality, which is a fantastic matchup in its own right, especially after what we just saw Mirwin doing and picking in that roadshow matchup. You heard Karzi talking about really the only thing we have going for us is we have the best top laner in the league. And that's all that matters. And you know what? Against MKOI, that might be true.
Yeah, and you love to have that type of, again, maybe you can never take anything all that seriously coming from someone like Karzi, but at the same time, getting a little bit of a boost, a little bit of pat on the back from your own teammate, and heading into a key series like this when you are that key matchup in the top side where you can find an angle. Yeah, I like that type of talk and mojo going around this series, and I think that you are going to find yourselves getting a very exciting matchup between both of these squads. We're going to see a little bit of rest versus rust. Yes, of course, everyone's had a little bit of rest, unfortunately, due to the way that the scheduling has worked for the LEC. But especially nobody's had more rest than your boys at Vitality with the wind down that has been the last month, 3 weeks or so for their schedule that they have had to go through. So seeing if they can maintain some of that strong form that we have seen them, and of course, unexpected form at this top level within the LEC, up against what has been the tested now in Movistar KOI, and maybe not the best of best, home runs of homestand weekends on Rift product wise. But absolutely what you said, identifying in with Mirwin, some interesting picks coming on in. That is going to be always one of those tickets for this Movistar KOI team to be a threat within the playoff bracket.
Yeah, and I think whoever wins that KC-G2 matchup, people will probably view as the favorites going through this playoff bracket. But I think people are criminally disrespecting and underrating Vitality, who, reminder, went 8-1 and are technically the top seed here. But another clip you heard from the teaser, Humanoid talking about this is his redemption playoff bracket, and I think you and I would both agree with that. And getting a head-to-head win against Jojo Pyun, who arguably has been the best, yes, better than Caps mid laner so far this split, would be a great first step.
Yeah, it really would be, and especially because not only is it just pretty much just on paper and on the Rift, you've seen that Jojo Pyun has usurped or at least taken over in this split that type of role at the very top of the mid lane charts. But for someone like Humanoid, again, looking for that redemption, that bounce back type of performance and year, getting that one up on the guy that has stepped on into the shoes, come on over and been that type of form, superstar type of player, that would be a big one for this Vitality squad, and especially kind of, I think, for the narrative moving forward for them within these playoffs. If you can generate some of that as one of the star players leading premier type of positions, that would be a good thing to see for Vitality.
Is there a way, if one of these squads 3-0 dumpsters, that you feel like they're maybe the favorites ahead of however KCG2 plays out?
It would have to be a very dominant, very exciting, I think, interesting type of 3-0 at that point in order to overpass whatever is going to come out of that KCG2 series. Just because I think, again, those teams are going to get whatever little benefit, little boost above and where you're expecting them, to finish out, or what type of power you're going to see, whether that is truly fair to either of Vitality or Movistar Koi. And I think that is actually, honestly, a little unfair to Vitality, given the way that they did play throughout the entirety of that split. But just again, unfortunately, the recency bias is a real thing. As much as I can recognize it and call it out, I fall victim to it too. And Vitality does suffer a little bit in that regard. And unfortunately, I don't think anything in this series, except for that outstanding dominant 3-0 performance, is going to change my mind about the top coming out of KC or G2.
Let's hope the Vitality Bees prove everybody wrong, because they deserve a deep playoff run, maybe even an international showing again for Carzzy and Humanoid. But we got LCS playoffs also that'll be going over the weekend, some big LCK matchups, lots that we'll have to talk about on the Monday. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Absolute stunners. Thanks for hanging out as always. We'll catch you on that flippity flip.